Welcome back to Cinema Through the Ages, my series where I rank the 5 most iconic movies from each decade according to ChatGPT. This is all part of my mission to explore cinema history one decade at a time. This time, we're moving into the 1940s, a decade shaped by war which had a huge impact on Hollywood. Many films were propaganda pieces designed to boost morale, yet despite the chaos, cinema attendance actually increased as people sought escapism. Even with government influence over the industry, some of the most iconic movies ever made came from this decade. I've now watched 5 of them: Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, Bambi, It's a Wonderful Life, and Citizen Kane. And as always, I'll be ranking them based on how much I enjoyed the film, cultural influence, impact on cinema, and whether it has aged well. So let's get into it, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Bambi, one of the first major films to highlight environmental issues, particularly hunting's impact on wildlife. The scene of Bambi's mother's death is still one of the most heartbreaking moments in animation, and I even remember feeling emotional as a kid watching it. Beyond its story, Bambi was a technical achievement. The film's vivid colours and detailed backgrounds made it one of the most visually stunning animated movies of its time. The so-called Bambi effect even influenced how people empathise with animals, discouraging hunting of those perceived as cute. Decades later, it's still a beloved classic, with kids worldwide growing up on it. At number 4, we have The Maltese Falcon. This film brought film noir into the mainstream, introducing morally complex characters, shadowy visuals, and the iconic femme fatale. Rather than clear-cut heroes and villains, this film embraced moral ambiguity, bringing a level of realism that wasn't common at the time. Humphrey Bogart's portrayal of Sam Spade set the blueprint for private detectives in noir films. Even watching today, his performance is incredible. That said, while I respect its influence, I personally enjoyed this one the least. So it stays at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is Casablanca, a war film that broke the mold, showing how Hollywood could explore war beyond just action and heroism. Rather than focusing on battle, Casablanca captures themes of sacrifice, international solidarity, and the moral dilemmas of wartime. Rick Blaine's character arc is one of the strongest I've seen so far in this series. He starts as a cynical man, but ultimately he puts aside his personal desires for the greater good. And the dialogue, so many iconic lines, some I didn't even realize came from here until watching.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
I absolutely loved this film. And more than 80 years later, it still holds up incredibly well. At number 2 is Citizen Kane. In terms of cinema impact, this is arguably the most important film on this list. Its non-linear storytelling, using flashbacks to piece together a man's life, was groundbreaking. Before this, films mostly followed a chronological structure. So every time you see a flashback in a movie today, you can thank Citizen Kane for pioneering this technique. Then there's the cinematography, deep focus photography where both the foreground and background stay sharply in focus, added depth and complexity to each shot. Now, was it the most enjoyable film I watched? Not really, but its influence on filmmaking is undeniable. And finally, at number 1, we have It's a Wonderful Life. If I rank purely on influence, this wouldn't be number 1, but I love this movie too much to put it anywhere else. One of the greatest Christmas films ever and still a holiday staple. Despite tackling dark themes like depression and suicide, its message of hope, family, and community is incredibly powerful. Released during wartime, I can imagine how necessary that message was, and honestly, it still resonates today. George Bailey is such a relatable protagonist, which makes his journey even more personal and rewarding. That emotional connection is why this film is still cherished decades later. So those are my rankings for the 1940s, a decade which gave us some of the most influential films ever, which continue to shape cinema today. Let me know your thoughts and stay tuned as I move on to the 1950s next.